I've been getting a lot of questions lately about how to train for specific races, which is why today on the show, I'm going to share with you how to train for a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a marathon, even if you have asthma. So what I've done is I've taken my entire running journey to this point, going from never running more than a couple laps around the playground in elementary school, all the way to running and winning a 100-kilometer ultra. I've taken all of this and packaged it into my 5-step strategy that you can use to build your next training program for whatever distance you are looking to run. Now, I've talked a lot about ultra running on this channel. Therefore, my focus today is on the races all the way up to running a marathon. And I'm going to go through the specifics of what I would do for running a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, so 13.1 miles, and a marathon. That doesn't mean that you can't take this exact same strategy and apply it to ultra running. I just know that if you've been following me long enough, you have heard a lot about my philosophies when it comes to training for an ultra marathon, defined as anything greater than 26.2 miles. And that brings me to step one in creating your next training routine. Safety comes first. Listen to your body. Therefore, I highly recommend that no matter if you have asthma or if you feel like you don't have any health issues whatsoever, that when you're looking at embarking on any race or event, or maybe you're just looking to do something like me, where I have a goal of running a certain amount of miles and I make it happen even if there isn't a race or event. No matter what, it is extremely important that you consult with your healthcare professional. And it's because your body is unique. Maybe you have asthma like me. Maybe, like me, you were diagnosed with asthma as a little kid, and then throughout the years you have tried different strategies to improve your lungs and to really live with your asthma. Maybe, like me, you have gotten to the point where you have been able to run a 5K or a 10K on your own. Or maybe you've been scared of even attempting to run a mile. No matter what it is, and maybe you don't have asthma, and maybe you've had knee injuries over the years, ankle injuries over the years, maybe you have issues with your cardiovascular system, maybe you have different food allergies. That's one thing that I've had to deal with over the years as well, is food allergies and outdoor allergies, and how our food allergies and outdoor allergies can actually compound on one another. What I found is when I'm training for anything, could be any distance, and I'm outside and I'm running, if I haven't been eating as healthily from the standpoint of avoiding anti-inflammatory foods that are really inflammatory to everyone, and then definitely avoiding foods that I have sensitivities to or allergies to, then if there are some allergens in the air, it affects me more. And I have different episodes you can check out all about this on my channel, how these different things can compound and really create issues for us when we are training, when we are doing anything. And this is why when you're looking to build a training program, you gotta start with safety first. And once you set this as a priority, you need to, throughout training, listen to your body. So you could set up your entire training program using the 5-step process that I'm going to share with you today. And you may realize that even the first week, a couple weeks in, it could be week 10 of your program, that something in your body doesn't feel right. That's why it is extremely important for you to listen to your body. So yes, safety comes first. Talk to your healthcare professional, get the support that you need, and make sure that when you have different things that you know are affecting your body, and affecting your health, and affecting how you could show up, and affecting how you may show up on a daily basis for your training, for a race, for an event, that you have a plan to handle that. For asthma, I always recommend, along with talking to your healthcare professional, to always have your inhaler with you, and to always, if you have allergies like me, always have Benadryl, always have your EpiPen, always have these things with you. But even with all of that, you may find that during your training, something new flares up. Something that hasn't affected you in the past, something you weren't aware of, especially when we're talking about running a distance that we haven't even gotten close to before. So this could mean that maybe you've never ran at all. Maybe you haven't ran more than a couple of blocks or a block, or maybe you've never ran at all ever and you just walked. And all of a sudden you're like, you know what? I want to run a 5K, which is 3 miles, which is a lot of miles if you've never ran before. Now, if you've already ran a half marathon and you're looking at doing your first 5K, that may not be a lot of miles. With that being said, you may be running that 5K much faster, a much faster pace than you run your half marathon or marathon. Right now, I'm actually in the process of increasing my pace, so I'm focused on shorter distances and instead of my 50 to 62 mile plus races. So what I'm finding is when I'm pushing harder, I need to be more cognizant with my body, with my asthma, with my plantar fasciitis, which I am still currently over. Really glad about that. But these different things can affect our bodies differently when we're going faster and we're going farther. So even if you're going into this, you're like, I don't have asthma, I don't have any health issues that I'm aware of, I invite you to listen to your body along the way, because as you run faster and as you run farther, you may become aware of how different things affect your body. Step 2. Integrating progressive overload into your training program. Now, the first couple steps I'm sharing with you are much more principle-based. We are looking at our event or our race at a high level, what we need to do in order to achieve our goal, how we need to protect ourselves, how we need to strengthen ourselves incrementally over time. As we get deeper into this, I am going to share with you how I would personally train for a 5K, a 10K, a half, and a marathon. And after looking at safety, really progressive overload is the key. This is what I have done throughout my life. When I was told at 4 years old that I could not play soccer and I would never be a runner, I looked for another way. I looked for a way that I wouldn't have to always rely on my inhaler over the years. Now, I've always had my inhaler with me, and I've always had a nebulizer nearby as well, because especially when I was younger and I would get sick, an inhaler wouldn't be enough. I would need a nebulizer to help me get through different asthma attacks. But the key with progressive overload, what is progressive overload? Well, it is really incremental overload or incremental strength. And this is what I've used over the years. After being told that I couldn't do these things, I found some alternative medicine doctors, or my parents found them for me, and really talked to them about how I could continue to play soccer. At the time, I didn't really care about running unless it was on the soccer field or the playground, but I wanted a way so I didn't have to use my inhaler all the time. And what I learned and what I've used to this day is that this one alternative medicine doctor shared with me, which was what we really need to do, Johnny, is incrementally strengthen your lungs. And how do we do this? Well, what I do today with running is based on what I did as a kid on the soccer field. And really what I did as a kid on the soccer field is, instead of taking my inhaler before practice, I would have it with me. It was real close by. But instead of taking it before I even started practice, I was advised that I should try and go 5 or 10 minutes without taking it and then take it. So that's what I did. And it was really tough. I had to be very mindful of what was going on. I had to listen to my body. This is what my doctor shared with me. He's like, 5 or 10 minutes, but if you need it sooner, take it sooner. The point here is to, instead of taking it before the activity, let's put a little bit of pressure on your body and see how you react cardiovascularly. See how your lungs react cardiovascularly. Let's give them the chance to strengthen themselves. This is the same reason why what I've learned over the years with different knee issues and ankle issues is if you sprain your ankle and you wrap it for weeks and weeks and weeks, you're actually gonna, what I have found is it takes longer for me to get over the ankle sprain. I am pretty sure that I had a minor ankle sprain a week or two ago. I was running and I misstepped and I twisted my ankle real bad. Well, I didn't end up wrapping it at all. And I'm not recommending that you should do this. I'm just telling you what I've done and how progressive overload has helped me with different things over the years. This was a very minor situation. I twisted my ankle. It was in pain. I didn't wrap it. I took it easier. I ended up only running 3 or 4 more miles that day instead of running 8 more miles that day. But what I have learned is when you wrap something, and while you are supporting it, you are also acting as a crutch. And when the ankle doesn't have to support itself, it doesn't have to heal as fast. Similar situation here. So if you take your inhaler before you even do the activity, you are telling your lungs that your lungs are always going to have the help of the inhaler. So your lungs don't have the incentive to grow stronger. But instead, if you tell your lungs, hey, inhaler is here for you if and when you need it, but I believe in you to strengthen yourself. And you start with 5 minutes, you start with 10 minutes, then your lungs are going to get stronger. Well, I did this for 5 or 10 minutes for a week or two, and then I went to 10 to 15 minutes, then 15 to 20 minutes. And my lungs were getting stronger, all the way to the point where after doing this for about a season, I could play an entire soccer game without using my inhaler. I always had it available though. Well, once I went into the off season, I would go into the season again, I'd have to do a similar situation. Because that's another thing I've learned with progressive overload, is you can progressively overload and strengthen your lungs, but if you don't continuously keep up the strength that you've built, then you may have to start at a lower interval than you were before. And that's fine, that's just how it works. But I did get to the point where I could play 3 or 4 soccer games in a day without using my inhaler. And as I've gotten further in my ultra running career, I always have it in my bag with me because you don't know how far from an aid station you're going to be. You don't know how far from an inhaler you're going to be. So I always have it with me, right next to me in my bag. But I have not used it in my past few races, including my 100-kilometer race that I won. So here is what it looks like when it comes to running. This is exactly what I use to go from never running more than 5 miles as an adult, all the way to running marathons, 50Ks, 50 milers, and 100Ks. What I recommend that you do, no matter where you're starting in your running journey. As we get through how many miles I would run per week for each of these distances you may be training for, when we look at the specific runs that I would do every week for the distances that you are looking at training for, and the cross training that I do in order to support all of this, the most important principle, other than safety and listening to your body, is progressively getting stronger in your lungs, in your cardiovascular system, in your respiratory system, and in your body overall. We do this when we're running with something I like to call walk running. For whatever reason, someone at some point made you and I feel that walking is bad. That if you're running and you need to take some time to walk, you're failing. These things are so wrong and far from the truth. I remember when I was training for my first marathon, I was getting to my first double-digit mileage ever. I never ran 10 miles before. And I was pretty terrified. I was also excited about it. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to run double-digit mileage. This is amazing. Well, this could be any mileage for you. Maybe you've never ran a mile before. Running a mile is an amazing thing. The first time you do it, you don't have to run a mile. The second time you do it, you don't have to run a mile. The third time you do it, you don't have to run a mile. Last time I checked, you can walk a whole 5K and it still counts as you completing a 5K. So what I recommend from a progressive overload perspective is no matter what run you're doing, run a little bit, walk a lot of it, and do that for a while. And eventually you'll get to the point where you can run more than you walk. And eventually you may even get to the point where you run the whole thing. My 50-mile race, I'm pretty sure I walked 10 miles. My 100K race, I think I walked half a mile to a mile because I had a cramp in my leg. But that was a year after my 50-mile race and a lot of training after my 50-mile race. Well, that first 10-mile run I ever did, I walked half of it. I walked 5 miles. That's what I did. I walked half, I ran half. And I did that whenever I needed to hit a distance I hadn't been at before. Because I'm looking at progressively overloading my body, looking at progressively overloading my lungs, my legs, everything. My body hasn't experienced this before, so let's give it some love. Walking is okay. You can do this with all the workouts I'm going to share with you today. Let's say that you're in a yoga class or you're in a high-intensity interval training class. When you need to rest, rest. You need to drink water, drink water. If you need your inhaler, use your inhaler. You need to listen to your body and just remember, we are progressively strengthening. We are incrementally strengthening our lungs, our heart, our body, and our mind. And we do it over time. Step 3, build, drop down, and taper. A couple months ago, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine at the gym that I go to. And we were talking about how he is preparing for his first marathon ever. And we were going through his training program and he was crushing it. His mileage was right on. The types of runs he was doing was right on. And he was giving himself plenty of time. I think we're talking 6 to 9 months of really getting to know his body before his first marathon race. And I'm going to share all of the details of mileage and runs and workouts and all this stuff next. But the one thing that he hadn't been doing, and when I started talking to him about, hey, so have you set up your program where you have build weeks, drop down weeks, and ultimately a taper before your race? And he was like, no, what is that? I've really just been running pretty consistently every week, and then I'll, after a couple weeks, run more mileage the next week, and I'll like build to there. So he was building, but he wasn't doing it methodically. And I get it, because when I was looking for my first marathon training program, I went on the internet, and this is pre-ChatGPT and all this stuff. And I was pulling up articles and getting Google search results and all this stuff, and it just was extremely complicated. I had no idea what any of these things were saying. I had no idea about half the stuff that was in these programs. Only thing I really understood is, oh, okay, I got to run 3 miles there and 4 miles there, and then I have to do a long run. Not really sure what a long run is, but I got to do a long run, and I guess it's the most important run of the week. I didn't know what tempo runs were, and just basic speed runs, all this stuff. All this vernacular, I'm like, this is not built for me. This is my first time doing it. I have no idea what any of this is. And then I would also look at the training program, and it would show like, it just seemed really random to me, because it was like, okay, so I run 3 miles that day, 5 miles that day, 2 miles that day. And then it goes up this week, down this week. What the heck is going on? Well, what the missing link for me and the missing link for my friend was the theory of building drop-down weeks and tapering. And here's really what it is. I eventually went with the Peloton first marathon training program. And I did it because I was really into riding the Peloton bike and doing the HIIT classes that Peloton had virtually. Was really into it at the time. And I saw they had this program where I could just take my phone with me, and it took me through this 18-week progression where I didn't really have to think about it. I'm like, great, I don't have to come up with my own workout. I'm just going to do the workouts. They have it week to week. I don't even know what's in the workouts until I do the workout. It took all the guesswork out. It took all the overwhelm out of I don't know what the heck I'm reading online, and simplified it for me. Well, I know that today, if you're watching this or listening to this episode, you have probably talked to AI about a training routine, and it's thrown a bunch of stuff at you, and really it's aggregating data from articles online, the same articles that I was reading 5+ years ago when I was working on my first training routine. And it probably didn't do a good job of explaining this either. Here is what I mean. When we are talking about building, we're talking about increasing our miles. And really, you want to do this for 3 weeks. We build in increments of 3 weeks. This will make even more sense once we get to how we look at total mileage on a weekly basis for each of these 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, etc. And when we look at the specific workouts we're doing. But really, you're going to build for 3 weeks. And then you're going to do something called a drop down. And guess how long this is? It's 1 week. So our training blocks are 4 weeks. That's it. When you're looking at building a program, all you really need to know is that your program is going to be built in sections or segments or blocks of 4 weeks. 4-week block. You build for 3 weeks, and then you have a drop-down week. The drop-down week typically doesn't have to be like this, but to simplify this, wherever your mileage started at the beginning of your build block is where your drop-down block or week should be. Let me give you some numbers. Let's say that you ran at the beginning of your build block 5 miles that week. And then maybe the next week you ran 7 miles. And I'm talking total mileage right now. And then let's say you did 9 miles. So you built, this is a pretty impressive build. You built all the way from 5 to 9 miles. Well, in your drop-down week, you got to drop down to 5 miles. You could drop more if you want. And I've done this, and it doesn't ruin this. And I've done this because I listened to my body, and my body was in a lot of pain, and I needed the time off. So you could drop lower than 5 miles in this example. The point is the drop down needs to be at least dropping down to the beginning of the build block. You can drop further, but you're not going to drop from 9 to 7. You need to drop at least to that 5. And the theory here is exactly why we started this by talking about listening to your body and then progressive overload. Because that's what we're doing here. We're progressively overloading our entire body for 3 weeks. And then we need to give our body some time to recover so we can keep building. And that's why we have a drop down week. It's similar to when you're working out and you take rest. There's a reason why we run a specific number of miles every week, and we don't try to get all those miles in the same day. And for most races, you're not going to run the race mileage until race day. 5Ks and 10Ks are a little different, but when we're talking about half marathons and marathons and beyond, you're probably not going to run that amount of miles, 13.1, 26.2, or if you're training for an ultra, you're not going to run those miles until race day. And it's because we are building and resting or dropping down. Now, the last part of this is tapering. When we're looking at a taper, the taper occurs at the end of your entire training program. And really what this is you are doing much more than just dropping down. You are tapering down to extremely low mileage, 1 to 2 weeks before your race. And really, this is based on you. If you've never built a program before, then I highly recommend you start with 2-week taper. But you may find that 2 weeks may be too long, and then you go down to a 1-week taper. I've also seen people do a 3-week taper. For me, 1 to 2 is perfect, and it really depends on how my body's feeling when I get deep into my program. And this is also why when we look at how long these training programs are, 18 weeks is really a great minimum when we're talking about training for a marathon. Now, a half marathon, you could probably have a little less minimum, and same with 10K, same with 5K, but it also depends on where you're starting. If you're starting from nothing, from never running before, then you may want that extra time. But when we're looking at a marathon training program, the absolute minimum that I have personally done is 18 weeks. And it's because we get 4 blocks plus a 2-week taper. So 4 times 4 is 16 weeks. That equals 4 blocks of building and tapering, of building and dropping down. And then you have 2 weeks for your taper. This is your taper. This works out really well. Now, using the mileage we already have here, here's what a 1 to 2 week taper could look like. You could, week 1 of the taper, drop down to 5 miles. But then week 2 of the taper, you're probably going to do 2 to 3 miles, if that. And really what you want to think about is week 2 of the taper, you're going into the race. So really what you want to do is move your body a little bit just to stay fresh, keep everything loosened up. But you're not trying to do anything crazy because you're setting yourself up for race day. So really, you probably want to even drop down even more. So probably 3 to 5 miles for week 1 of taper. And then week 2, you're probably looking at 1 to 3 miles. So that's the difference between a taper and a drop down. Drop down, we drop to where we started at the beginning of the build. Taper, we want to drop down more significantly, and we're doing it twice. Now, if you're only going to take 1 taper week, then you're going to skip this initial drop down and go to the really aggressive low drop down immediately. And then you're going into your race. When you're looking at maybe you want to add a 3rd week or 3 weeks, then you could do the 5 miles, maybe 3 miles, and then 1 mile. And really, I really only see tapers of 3 weeks when we're talking about longer distances, marathon plus. But if you need it, if your body's telling you you need a longer taper, then take a longer taper. Now that you know how to structure your training program, let's move on to step 4, which I like to work backwards, which is why I start with what are the total miles that I need to run my peak week of training. Now, the peak week of training is right before the taper. So you're looking at 1 to 3 weeks before your race. And when I look at a training program, what has been easiest for me over the years is thinking about what is the total amount of mileage I need to run in a week. And I do this because I'm busy, you're busy, so it's nice to know I need to run X amount of miles this week. And if I have a busier day where I had a workout scheduled, I had a run scheduled, I'm not able to run as many miles that day, that's okay. I can still get a couple miles in so I can decrease the total mileage that I need to run for the week. It starts taking the pressure off instead of, oh, I have to run this many miles this day, this many miles this day, this many miles this day. I just tell myself I have X amount of miles I need to run this week, and I'm gonna slowly knock those miles off throughout the week. And then when I get to my long run over the weekend, which I'll talk about in the next point here, I know how many miles my long run is going to be. So what I like to do is use what we learned in step 3, the build, drop down, and taper weeks. And the fact that our build, drop down blocks are 4 weeks long. And I like to structure those to get me to peak week mileage. And here is what, when I'm looking at a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a marathon, the mileage that I would shoot for if I was running it for the first time. And I'm going to give you a range because depending on how you and your body feels and what your goals are, you may want to run less or more miles your peak week. So let's start with a 5K. The great thing here is if you are looking to run a 5K for the first time, when we're looking at peak week mileage, really it could be somewhere in the 5 mile to 10 mile range. I know this is a long range, but a 5K is 3.1 miles long. So when I look at training for a 100-kilometer race, I never run 100 kilometers in one day. Just don't. Peak week is going to be something like 20 miles, 30 miles, 20 miles. Now, there's different philosophies that have changed in recent years for ultra running, where running less miles and running them faster is better than running more miles and running them slower. So I am adjusting that in my mind as well, where I could probably go and do 15, 25, 15 for my main 3 runs that week. And the rest of the week, I'm probably only going to be doing a few miles a day. But when we look at a 5K, you're running 3.1 miles. Now, if you've never ran before, 3.1 miles can seem astronomical, especially if you have asthma and you haven't strengthened your lungs to where they need to be yet. And you may be a little terrified about that. I was so scared when I was a kid and we had the fun run. The fun run. It's supposed to be for fun, but my doctor told me I shouldn't be a runner. So every fun run, which was every year, I was terrified. It wasn't very fun because I didn't know if I was going to have an asthma attack or not. I didn't really know how to go about it. I would run one lap around the field and feel great and then feel terrible for the next lap and have to walk. And everyone's running by and they're feeling all good and making fun of me because I'm walking and I'm slow and all this stuff. 3.1 miles may sound astronomical to you. Well, the great thing is, in order for you to get to a place where you can feel extremely confident and comfortable completing a 5K, you really only need to run 5 to 10 miles your peak week. Now, in the last point that I go through today, the last part of this 5-step process of building your training program, I'm going to go through how we actually break this down, but in total, 5 to 10 miles. You can just run 5 miles or walk run 5 miles, walk run 10 miles, not in one day, total throughout the week. That could look like taking a 1 mile walk run for 5 days of that week. You could do a 1 mile walk run 7 days that week. This is your peak week. This isn't the entire training program. This is what you're building up to, is a 5 to 10 mile week if you're looking to run a 5K. Now, if you've been running 5Ks for a long time and you're looking to get faster, then yeah, you're probably going to want to be in the 10 miles and you could even go all the way up to 20 miles a week if you want. For me, I am considering shorter races right now, 5Ks, 10Ks, to get faster overall for my longer races. So I'm currently running 25 to 30 miles a week, but it's because I've been doing it for a long time and I'm working on maintaining my strong lungs. But if I was running 5K for the first time, this is all I would look at building myself up to for my peak week mileage. Let's look at a 10K. A 10K is 6.2 miles. And our peak week of training for a 10K isn't that much different than a 5K. I'm probably being a little more aggressive with mileage for the 10K than the 5K. But really, you run 10 miles your peak week, you're doing extremely good. And you could go up to 15 miles. You could go up to 20 miles too. But really, if you want to run 6.2 miles, you've never done it before, you run 10 miles in your peak week, you're going to finish that. You have a strong chance to finish that 6.2 mile race. Same thing. We're incrementally building to this point. If you want to do it a little faster, then maybe shoot for 15 miles. Even if you shot for 15 miles, this could be running or run walking 2 miles per day your peak week. That's it. Now, that may sound astronomical now, but if this is 16 weeks into a program where you've been building your lungs up, building the strength in your body, you will be ready to do this. Now let's look at a half marathon, which is 13.1 miles. Or, I believe a marathon's 42 kilometers, so 21 kilometers. A 21K, 13.1 miles. For this, we're looking at a bit more. And I do have a wider range for this one. 15 to 25 miles. That's your peak week. On the low end, you're talking running 3 miles per day, 5 days of that week. On the high end, you're talking about 3 miles per day, maybe 4 miles one day or 2 days, 7 days of that week. Now, I don't recommend running every single day, even though I do it sometimes. But when I'm in a training program, I like to take at least 1 full day off from any training per week. Not because I want to do it, but because my body wants me to do it. Because when I listen to my body, that's what it wants. Similar to the build drop down mentality, having 1 day per week for your body to be able to recover actually empowers you to hit your mileage the following week. Now, let's look at marathon. So 26.2 miles. Our peak week, this is a 42K. Our peak week is really 25 to 35 miles. I've had friends run way less than this. I've had friends run all over between 25 and 35 miles their peak week. Some going all the way up to 35, some just doing 25, some even doing 20. It's a wide range and it really depends on your goals and it depends on everything else that you're doing as part of your training. But even this, 25 miles, this is about 3.5 miles per day if you ran 7 days in a week. And 35 miles is 5 miles a day if you ran 7 days a week, just to put that in perspective. So this is what we're building up to. And really, when we're looking at peak weeks, this is as much about your mental state going into a race as it is about hitting these numbers to be physically ready. For me, I tell myself before I even start a training program, if I can get to my peak week hitting this interval, then I know I'll be able to finish the race. And it's amazing. That is an empowering thought to have. Because instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I have to run 5 kilometers, I have to run 10 kilometers, I have to run 13.1, I have to run 26.2 miles. All you're thinking is, I just need to get to peak week, hit the peak week numbers, and I will finish my race. That's it. It takes the pressure out of thinking of the race distance that you may have never ran before. And instead, you just know that you hit the peak week mileage, you're going to finish the race. And remember, you can always walk during the race. And step 5, piecing together the different types of workouts in order to get you to peak week and ultimately to finish your race. Now, I'm going to start by listing the types of workouts that I do when I'm training for a race. And then I'm going to go through each type of workout and give you an idea of what this could look like for each distance that we're talking about today, 5K, 10K, half marathon, and marathon. But let's start with the types of workouts that you're going to be looking at when building your program. And it all starts with the most important workout, your long run. Now, I'm going to go through exactly what this looks like for each of those races. But the theory here is the most important workout of the week is the long run, because this is your practice race day. And you get this every single week throughout your program. In an 18-week program, you're going to have 18 long runs. Now, depending on where you are in the program, you may be building, you may be dropping down, and you may be tapering. So the long runs may be longer in some areas and shorter in others. But the long run is the longest run you do that week. And it is the most important run you do that week. You still want to do your other runs, but if you need to skip a workout throughout your week, try not to skip your long run. You have a lot more wiggle room with all your other workouts, runs, cross-training, etc. Your long run, you probably don't want to skip more than 1, maybe 2 in your entire program. And if you skip it, I highly recommend that you try and make it up on a day that is close to when you're supposed to do the long run. Now, the long run is best done the same day that race day occurs. What do I mean by this? Well, if your race day is on a Saturday, then your long run should be on a Saturday each week. If your race day is on a Sunday, then your long run should be on a Sunday each week, and so forth. So the long run is the most important workout. Now, what I don't want you to do is get way too busy with life, with training, all your commitments, and you feel like you have to skip your long run, and then you reschedule it, and then you blow up your next training week because you have way too much mileage that week. So you gotta be really careful. When I say reschedule, I mean, if one week you can't run it on Saturday and you need to run it on Sunday instead, then that's okay. You could also move it to Friday, but I wouldn't move it too much more than 1 day away from when you're supposed to do it. If you have to, skip it, maybe increase your mileage across your other runs that week. Or if you have to do a week where you need to have your long run be less mileage than it is, but you have more time earlier in the week to hit your mileage to get your ultimate mileage goal for the week, then you can do that. But the long run is the most important part of all this. Next one, just gonna keep it simple. Short runs. Your short runs are really to build your weekly mileage. You can take them at whatever pace you want. You're just getting mileage in. So when we're working towards our peak week mileage, we're going to have mileage goals for other weeks. They're going to be less than the peak week. But our short runs allow us to take bites out of the total mileage that we have that week in a really low-key way. We're not trying to set any records. We're just trying to get miles. And this could be short run walks, etc. Next, we have tempo, or what I like to call interval runs. Now, if you're looking to get faster So let's say that you've already done a couple of 5Ks, a couple of 10Ks, and you're looking at getting faster at those distances. Or maybe you've been competing at half marathons and marathons for a while and you want to get faster at those distances. If you are looking to get faster, then your tempo and interval runs are key. And really what this is runs where, when we were talking about progressive overload with walking and running, well, this is where we look at if you are used to a specific pace. So for me right now, a 9 to 9.5 minute pace is probably what I'm taking most of my long runs and short runs at. For my tempo runs, I'm going to be mixing my 9.5 minute mile with, I'm getting pretty aggressive with this, like a 6.5 minute mile. So I'll run my 9.5 and I'll do intervals with a faster mile. For you, this could be run walking. This could be, instead of run walking, you're doing a really slow run pace and then you're picking it up a little bit throughout the run. But this is how we really build strength in our bodies, in our lungs, in our minds when we're looking to get faster. This is your first race ever. Don't worry about tempo and interval runs as much. Just focus on your walk running, getting your miles in, etc. But if you're looking to get faster, your tempo and interval runs are extremely important. Especially if you already have the long run mentality, short run mentality down, this is what's going to get you faster. Running more miles, total miles in the week, doing more short runs with more mileage in them, making them more than just short runs, you're going to get more out of the tempo and interval runs. And this is really the new philosophy in ultra running, is if you're an ultra runner like me, once you get to a certain mileage, you get used to running 50, 60, 70 mile weeks, running 80, 90, 100 mile weeks is going to get you less progress than just doing more tempo and interval runs throughout your weeks. I learned this the hard way training for my last race, where I was like, I want to get faster. I'm going to run more miles. And I burned myself out instead of focusing on tempo and interval runs. Next, we got all that cross training with HIIT, high intensity interval training, with lifting, just focusing on heavy lifting, lower body, upper body, and then stretching / yoga. Now, none of this is required for training, especially if this is your first time doing these things. I will say that I personally have less injuries when I have a healthy dose of cross-training in my life. I therefore highly recommend that you integrate, at the very least, stretching / yoga, and then one of these. And really, you just need to focus a little bit on strength so that you have strong glutes, strong core, strong quads, strong hamstrings, strong calves to take the pressure off that you have when you hit the ground. When your feet hit the ground, vibrations go up through your body. So having strong glutes, engaging your glutes at the right time, using these muscles basically to soften the impact. That's why we want cross-training. We're looking to soften the impact. Cross-training is much more about longevity in our running, in our races, preventing injuries than getting faster. And I say that with a caveat. What I have found that when I focus on HIIT workouts during my training programs, this combines with my tempo workouts and helps me become a faster runner. So if you are looking at all this today, or listening to all this, and you're like, you know what, I want to run a 5K, I want to run a 10K, but I don't love running. Well, you should still focus on getting that long run in every week, get some mileage in here and there, and then throw in some high intensity interval training, stretching and yoga, and maybe even lift once a week. It definitely makes it more fun. And that's where I'm at right now, is I'm having so much fun in my training because I'm making time to do all of this, which is why instead of running 50, 60, 70-mile weeks, I'm running 30-mile weeks. And I'm doing HIIT a couple times a week. I'm lifting 1 or 2 times a week. I'm playing tennis every week. And I am stretching and doing yoga multiple times per week because I love all of this. Now let's break down each of these workouts individually for 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon, starting with the long run. Long run is really simple. You need to do this once per week during your training cycle. Therefore, what I want to show you is what I aim for when looking at each of these races for my longest run of my entire training program. This is the run that you will do during your peak week. This is the run that you will really be able to use the mileage, the total mileage that you're shooting for that week. You can subtract out the long run, and now you know what to do for your short runs, and if you want to throw tempo runs, what to do for that as well. But really, let's start with a 5K. With our 5K, our longest run, so this is our peak week long run, really is going to be 2 to 4 miles. For our 10K, we're looking at 5 to 7 miles. And these races are very interesting because these are the only 2 races where the long run could be the length of the race. A 5K, 3.1 miles, a 10K, 6.2 miles. So your long run for your peak week, if you're feeling up to it, you could run a 5K that week, or even more than the 5K that week for your long run. Same thing with your 10K. You could run your 10K or even a little bit more. You can also run less, so you don't have to run a 5K as your long run to finish a 5K. You could just run 2 miles. If you feel sick during your peak week, maybe you don't even want to run 2 miles. You could still finish your 5K even if you get sick during your peak week. Now, I've had this happen where I've gotten sick before races. I got sick a month before my 100K, and I was freaked out. I'm like, maybe this ruined my entire training program. Well, it didn't. I ended up winning the race. So as long as you have a solid training program, you do your best to stick to it best you can, you have some wiggle room for things like getting sick, for things like missing different workouts and runs. And now let's look at our half marathon and marathon. So our 13.1 miles, or our 21K, is our half marathon. For this, really your long run is going to be somewhere between the 8 and 10 mile range. You could, I guess, run a half if you really want to before a half marathon, but you don't have to. And really, 8 to 10 miles is all you really need to build yourself up to complete that half marathon. Then when we look at a marathon, this may seem a little bit scary. It definitely scared the heck out of me when I first saw how many miles I was going to need to run my peak week. But after 16 weeks building up to it, I was able to do it. You're looking at 18 to 20 miles. I've seen people even run 22 miles. I think I've ran 22 miles leading up to some marathons, and that's okay as well. It's a little overkill. You really need to be in the 18 to 20 mile range. If you're really not feeling it, you could probably get away with 16 miles or even 15 miles that peak week, as long as you're hitting the higher end of your peak week goal mileage. So instead of just hitting 25, if you're going to run a shorter long run for your peak week of marathon training, you probably want to be hitting closer to that 35 miles total that week. So that would look like having a 15 or 16 mile long run and then another 20 miles that you break up throughout the rest of the week with your short runs and your tempo runs. Next, we have short runs. Let's start with 5K. For our 5K, what we really want to look at is doing 1 to 2 short runs per week. And the mileage that we're looking to hit for each of our short runs is also 1 to 2 miles per run. So when you are looking at building your program, when you're earlier in the program, working up and building your body, building your mileage, you're going to be running on the lower end of this range. And as you get closer to your peak week, you'll be running more times per week and more miles per run. But that is how I look at it when I build my training programs, is we're increasing the frequency of runs and the mileage per runs. And it's up to you kind of how your body feels. You can mess with this a little bit. That's why I also like to have a lot of time before my race so that I can really figure out what feels best for me. Now let's look at 10K. For a 10K, we're looking at 1 to 3 times per week for our short runs, and somewhere between 2 and 3 miles per run. Now, if you really are starting from scratch and you've never ran before at all and you're running your first 10K, then you could even start 1 mile per short run at the very beginning of your training program. But as you progress towards that peak week, you really should be in the 2 to 3 mile range per short run. Now, this changes a little bit as we get to our half marathon and marathon. So here is our half. We're looking at 2 to 3 times per week. That's what you should be doing your short runs. And we want to be doing 2.5 to 5 miles per run. Same theory, start on the lower end of the range and work up to that 5 mile mark. And once again, if you have never ran before and you're looking to run your first half and you're just going for half right out of the gate, you could start even lower in the 1 to 2 mile range, but you're gonna need to build up pretty quickly, probably at least by that second block. So that first 4-week block, you could do it a little lower. And then when you get to that second 4-week block, you're probably going to want to be in the 2 to 2.5 mile range for each of those short runs. Now we got a marathon, so 26.2 miles. And this one is similar to the half, really looking at 2 to 3 times per week. But your mileage is going to be 3 to 6 miles per run. Now, if you are coming out of the gate, you've never ran before, or you've never ran more than a mile or half a mile before, and you're looking at running a marathon, you can do it. You're just going to need to really listen to your body, and you are going to want to ramp up to this real quick. But if you need to start slow your first couple of weeks, or an even better way of looking at this is I highly recommend you hitting these numbers. But if you need a walk for the first few weeks and you need a walk run throughout the entire training program, then hitting this mileage while walking is going to be extremely important for you. So I would really advise that you probably want to try and hit these numbers, but if you have to walk it earlier in the program, then great, do that. If you have to run it throughout the entire program, great, do that. Let's just make sure we're getting enough mileage in our weeks and compounding the mileage week after week after week. Because what I don't want you to think is that you saw the peak week mileage and you're like, okay, I just need to be able to run 35 miles in 1 week before the marathon. I don't need to run anything leading up to it. No, that's not how it works. Cumulative mileage over the 16 weeks, 18 weeks, whatever, 24 weeks, 30 weeks, whatever your training cycle is, the cumulative mileage is what's going to get you there. I just like to share what the peak week mileage is, because then you can adjust your mileage from there. Okay, I have to run 25 to 35 miles my peak week. what do all the weeks before that look? That's the highest I need to run peak week. Let's see how we can incrementally get there. It's about the incremental growth. It's not about, okay, I run 35 miles a week, I'm ready for my marathon in 2 weeks. It's not how it works. Next, tempo runs. If this is your first time running this distance, or your first time really running at all and having a race or a goal or an event in mind, you could skip tempo runs. But you can't necessarily skip the mileage that you would be doing for the tempo run. So I invite you, if you go through this and you're like, hey, I already have enough on my plate, I got the long run, I got the short run, I want to do some cross training, maybe I could skip something. Well, you could, instead of doing a tempo run, do an extra short run. Or instead of doing a tempo run, do a HIIT workout. Now, when we're looking at our half marathon and marathon mileage, it may be more important to get the mileage in than the extra HIIT workout. But really, remember, listen to your body and just look at what I have for you here. So, for a 5K, really all you're looking at is doing one per week. So one tempo run per week, and it really just needs to be 1 mile. So the tempo run could be as simple as, you could even walk. You could even walk for a 1/4 mile and then run for a 1/4 mile and run faster than you usually would. You could jog for a 1/4 mile and then run for a mile. You could jog for a 1/4 mile and then run for a 1/4 mile. You could run for a 1/4 mile and then sprint for a 1/4 mile. This is a really fun workout. So I highly recommend, even if you're thinking, I could skip it. Tempo runs are super fun, and it mixes it up because you're not just going the same pace all the time. You can do it with songs. That's what I like to do, is I listen to a song, and when the beat drops, I go and I push real hard. And then when it slows down, I slow down. So you can really have a lot of fun with these. Let's look at a 10K. For a 10K, we're looking at same thing, just one time per week, and maybe 1 to 2 miles. Another thing here, when you're earlier in your training program, you could start by not even doing tempo runs, and maybe the second half of your training program, introduce them, especially once you start getting bored of all the miles you're doing in your short runs. You could even take part of a short run and do a tempo version of it for a mile, maybe for 2 miles. So really, when you're looking at tempo runs, look at this as this is where you get to have some fun. Now, you also need to be a little more aware of your asthma for tempo runs. This is where you definitely need to listen to your body. And if maybe in short runs you don't need your inhaler, tempo runs you may need it. Now, you want it with you all the time. You may need to take your inhaler more often in a tempo run than a short run, or even than a long run. It really depends on how the going faster versus going farther in mileage affects you and your asthma. Now let's look at our half marathon, 13.1 miles. What are we looking at here? For a half marathon, we're still really only doing this one time per week. And we're looking at 2 to 3 miles for our tempo run. And remember, this also depends on your goals. If you're looking at getting faster at these distances, you've done them before, you feel comfortable and confident at a distance, your lungs feel comfortable and confident, then you could throw in more tempo runs. You could do 2 per week. You can integrate them in other runs more often as well. I'm just saying that if you're looking at integrating these into your workouts, you don't have to do tempo runs in order to complete your races. They're just a great way to have fun and to really create a more well-rounded running regimen. Now, 26.2 miles, our marathon. What does this look like? Well, a marathon, really, you're still looking at once per week. I remember the marathon program I was doing through Peloton, I think sometimes they'd have 2 in a week for me, but really it was just 1 tempo run per week. And we're looking at 3 to 6 miles for that tempo run. Now let's talk about cross training. HIIT, or high intensity interval training, is my favorite type of cross training. It may not be the most important for you and your success in these races, in these different distances that you are looking at training for. Stretching / doing some sort of yoga is probably more important, just to protect your body, let it relax and recover. But HIIT, for me, is definitely the most fun. So what I invite you to do, if you don't like the idea of doing these tempo workouts and maybe you don't want to just be running all the time, then maybe instead of doing that tempo workout, you look at doing a HIIT workout instead. Here is what it could look like. For a 5K, you could do 0 to 1 per week. For a 10K, you could do, once again, 0 to 1 per week. And when we're looking at a half marathon, then we get to the half and the full. And really, this could be 0 to 1 as well. For me, I'm doing a half or a full. I'm doing at least 1 per week. 1 per week. It's too fun. It's too good for you. The first marathon I ever tried to run, and I bailed on it, I was actually just doing a long run every week and HIIT the rest of the week. I wasn't running at all. So I was doing a long run and HIIT. Now I didn't get that far into the program, so I was only running like 6 miles as my long run, but I was doing HIIT like 5 or 6 days of the rest of the week, which I don't necessarily recommend you doing. I just know that I felt like I was in such good shape, and when I was doing that long run, it wasn't that long of a long run. I felt amazing. I couldn't even tell that I wasn't doing miles the rest of the week because I was spending so much time doing HIIT. Now I really ended up bailing on my first couple marathons because I didn't have a training program set up. I was just winging it. I was really only doing long runs with a buddy of mine who was in an official training program. So that's the importance of putting a training program together and knowing what you need to hit for your peak week, what you need to hit for your long runs, and having an idea of what all your other workouts could look like, because that is really going to help you have the confidence to go through with the thing. So what does HIIT look like? Well, HIIT could really be a 30-minute to 60-minute workout with weights, with a stationary bike, with a rower. Technically, a tempo workout is a high-intensity interval training workout. So really, these are short workouts. You could even do a 15 to 20-minute workout. The key here is I like to use this to mix things up so that I'm not always running. I love the row machine. Love it. I love lifting weights. So doing that in a way where I'm elevating my heart rate and then learning how to bring my heart rate back down and recover, I absolutely love. And I've seen amazing results in my speed, in my injury prevention, and even though it's probably not most important, because when we're looking at safety, safety is the most important, I just have way more fun when I add HIIT workouts to my training regimen. Next, lifting. I also really enjoy to heavy lift. And what I have found is that lifting has helped prevent a lot of injuries for me. It's also helped me recover from injuries. It's helped me recover from plantar fasciitis, strengthening other muscles in my legs to take the pressure off my heels. It has helped with knee sensitivity, with knee pain, by building up my glutes, my quads. I've been able to take the pressure off of my knees. So lifting, when we're looking at integrating this into a training program, it's really, if you're looking to do this for the long term, you're not just looking at doing one race, you're looking at doing a bunch of races, then having a lifting routine is going to be extremely important for you. Now, when we're looking at doing a 5K for the first time, maybe you just have a goal to do a 5K, you just want to complete it, just check it off and be done. You don't necessarily need to lift. I do recommend, though, if you start feeling different things in your body, you're like, oh, different things are hurting. Well, it might be because different muscles in your body may be underdeveloped. You may need to give them a little bit of love by strengthening them, just like we work on strengthening our lungs. So similar to HIIT, when we're looking at a 5K, a 10K, a half marathon, and a marathon, it's the same recommendations. 0 to 1, 0 to 1, 1 and 1. And especially what I've seen for myself is I've ran marathons without lifting and I've ran marathons with lifting. And I perform better and feel better and have way less injuries when I lift and run marathons. You don't have to lift much, just once per week. And when you're looking at 5K and 10K, you could lift one week, not lift the other week. You can do every other week. Maybe you want to integrate HIIT and lifting. You can do HIIT one week, lifting the next week. Could probably pull that off with the half and the full as well. If you want to alternate, do lift, HIIT, lift, HIIT, lift, HIIT. Because I know you don't have unlimited time. So if you want to integrate both, just do one each week and then alternate the weeks. Now, if you are looking at lifting, really you want to do exercises for your glutes. It's going to protect your knees, your quads. I also look at calf work, but you don't want to do too heavy with calves. Same with hamstrings. And guess what? You can also do upper body. You could work on chest. You are going to want to do core. Core is extremely important. You do biceps, triceps, shoulders, etc. If you really wanted to focus your time, then really I would look at glutes, quads, and core. And if you want to throw some upper body, then chest and shoulders. Especially if you're holding a pack, having that strength is going to really help you get deeper into races, especially if you're looking at a marathon and you're holding a pack the entire time. Having stronger shoulders, having stronger chest may help you alleviate some of that pressure, some of that pain holding a pack for 3 to 6 hours. Lastly, stretching/yoga. This is not optional. The great thing though is you don't have to stretch or do long yoga sessions for this to be impactful to your training. So when we're looking at our 5K, 10K, we're going to have a little less than if we're looking at a half marathon or a marathon, just because we're doing a lot less miles. The key here is we want to integrate this. So for a 5K or a 10K, we're looking at 1 to 3 times per week. For our half marathon and marathon, we're looking at 2 to 3 times a week for our half and 3 or more times for our full. If you really wanted to, you could stretch every day for any of these types of races. And you can stretch for 5 minutes a day. What I do, I've done this for a while because I dropped the ball on my stretching and yoga. I was only stretching or doing yoga once per week and not really anything else. And now what I'm doing that helped me get over my plantar fasciitis, I have a whole video and podcast episode about that. You can check it out on my channel. I even have it linked below and in the show notes if you're listening to this as a podcast. But really, 5 minutes isn't that long. I don't expect you to do it out of the gate, stretching every single day. But if you want to add something to your routine, runner or not, that's going to help you with the longevity in your life, then stretching is the way to go. Well, along with having continuous, consistent movement. Movement is so powerful. Movement is what I'm passionate about, and that's why I created my 3 pillars of healthy living guide, with the 3 pillars being movement, tracking, and accountability. What we've really talked about today encapsulates all of those things. Movement, we're moving in different ways throughout our training program. Tracking, we're tracking how we're progressing through our training program. We're listening to our body through our training program. And accountability, you are being accountable for yourself. And by being here and spending some time with me, now you can also be accountable with me. And a great way to do that is by commenting below if you're watching this as a video on YouTube, or sending me an email, johnny@athletewithasthma.com, letting me know how your training is going, letting me know what race you are training for, and giving me updates on how it's going. Now, if you're interested in my Healthy Living Guide or any other resources and figuring out maybe it might be a good fit for us to work together someday, then I have links to all of those things in the YouTube description and in the show notes if you're listening to this as a podcast. I look forward to continue to serve you and hear how your race goes. I'll see you in the next episode.